it's a big headache now. You can't just sack Kluivert and ask Shin Tae-yong to come back. It's too late. Eric Doher has to stick with his decision. And with that, I hope Kluivert knows what to do when Indonesia hosts Bahrain on Tuesday in their next World Cup qualifying match. If they fall again at home, I think it's very hard to see Kluivert lasting beyond June. In just the first 45 minutes, the honeymoon is truly well and over for Patrick Kluivert in his first match in charge of Indonesia as they lost 1-5 away to Australia in the final round of Asian qualifying for the 2026 World Cup earlier this evening. And it was an absolute disaster in the first 45 minutes. And in fact, you can even count the second half, even though they performed better, they showed more passion, but the Garudas were simply outmuscled, and a few of them had shown questionable qualities. It's like, for all their pedigree in all these naturalized players, what were they doing? It's like Kluivert managed to turn a team that was disciplined, that was focused, and were hard to break down into a collection of individuals in just a space of 4 months. In fact, in the space of 2 months since his appointment as the new head coach of the Garudas, and already, even just after his opening game, a number of the Indonesian fans are already calling for the head of the former Dutch international striking icon, which is understandable because there were so many things that were wrong from Indonesia from the get-go. Even though maybe for the first 10 minutes they were okay, but after that penalty missed by Kevin Dix, it was totally all downhill. And with that, Indonesia now have an uphill task to climb, and especially for Kluivert, it's like, how did he manage to turn a team that is still in good contention for the second automatic spot in Group C into a battle of individuals who have no idea what they were doing despite their European pedigree, despite their football education, in spite of the clubs that they played for. It's like everything was just wrong on so many levels. Already the first indication that things might not be going that well was when Kluivert announced his starting 11 for the game against the Socceroos. Knowing that they're playing away in Sydney, it's like Kluivert and his new coaching staff felt confident enough to play a 4-3-3 formation. It's totally Dutch in the formation, totally Dutch in terms of how they want to set up to play and how they are probably usually brought up to play. It's a huge departure from the previous 5-2-3 or the variation of 5-3-2 under his predecessor Shin Tae-yong, in which they depended a lot more on wing backs, on counter attacks, on good flowing play, but also proving themselves in more than one occasion to be very hard to break down and very difficult to cause any issues where, difficult for opponents to get their way, especially if the opponents are a little mentally weaker, no matter how much more skillful or more technical they are. It's like, when you look at the starting lineup, 4-3-3, it's a huge departure. Never mind. But you look more closely at the starting 11. Justin Hubner is suspended, so he can't play. But the most shocking thing is, Risky Riddle, who eventually came on in the second half, he was dropped to the bench. And to think that he was ever present at this stage of the World Cup qualifying for the Garudas, In fact, the only local born to be an ever-present, playing all the 90 minutes or large parts of the game at this stage, where the opponents are not your regional rivals but sterner tests which they largely had passed. And it's quite lamentable that it's like Martin plays in goal, not surprising. He's the best that Indonesia had. Then you look at your back four. Jay Itzis, captain, alright, centre back, no problem. And then you have three other strangers alongside him. No Risky Rido on the bench. Justin Hubner, suspended. Sandy Walsh, Jordi Amat on the bench also. So who else? So you have one debutant, Dean James at left back. Kevin Dix for his second appearance at right back, where he previously, in his debut, he played only 45 minutes before he withdrew injured at halftime against Japan. Then you got Mies Hilgers, another centre back, number 2. Then in your midfield three, you had Tom Hay, Nathan Joan and Kelvin Verdong. Not surprising, they have been ever present under Shin Tae-yong previously too. Then you have your front three. Your Marcelino Ferdinand, the only local born player in the starting 11. Rafael Sturridge, he alongside Marcelino were the only two who featured in the ASEAN Championship under Shin Tae-yong. And another debutant, Ole Romani, Marcelino's club teammate at Oxford United of England. So it's a rather curious setup where it's quite clear they wanted to play the Dutch way. The Dutch influence is very clear, but that first 45 minutes show is an illustration on how not to play international football. Why do I say how not to play? It's not about having how many European based players you have. It's about the jersey. It's about the jersey the players wear when it comes to this stage, when it comes to this kind of international tournament, where you are not playing for your employers but for the nation you are representing. And unfortunately for Indonesia, that first 45 minutes, it's like at least 3 or 4 players look very questionable in this regard, particularly Dean James, Mies Hilgers, to an extent Kevin Dix, after he missed his early penalty when it was 0-0, where he hit the woodwork in the 8th minute. And then you have Ole Romani, who barely had a good touch or shot, only a cross that went nowhere, but that was easily cleared in the first half. You feel that because they have not played as often as your Jesus, Pace, Verdong, Tom Hay, who even recently took up Indonesian language classes from his social media, it's like that commitment is very questionable. It's like when the chips were down, especially after they were given a sucker punch, where Joon, who was rude to have hauled down Miller for the penalty which was given after the video assistant referee review, and penalty converted. And the next thing you know, what happened to that defense? Wasn't it supposed to be tougher than an all-local lineup defense? No, it was it's like their numbers, the Socceroos number 7, the ethnic Indian guy, he was allowed to run free and he was onside somehow. That's the best part. It says the company were totally behind. They were like a bunch of ragtop players. Already the signs were there even before a penalty. When Hilgers tried to play back to the goalkeeper and tried to replay as though they were playing another European club game or league game. But international football is different. The Socceroos, even with their cast of European-based players, knew that very well in contrast. Why do I illustrate that? It's because they can be based in Europe now, but they have been born, they have been bred, they have been raised in their home nation, and they have learned their football, that the football culture, the understanding, and what it means to be an Australian. These players, those Socceroos, know it very well. But for those naturalized Garudas, very few know what it means to understand, what it means to play for Indonesia in front of their fanatical fans, in front of an expectant nation that only wants their best, only the best, whether it's in the output. Sometimes maybe they know the result is tough, but they want the output, the commitment, and that's where several of those naturalized players who were playing in the red of Indonesia were found very wanting in that first half, very wanting. So in a way, the Indonesian national team, for that first 45 minutes, they were found to be having that Dutch disease. So when it comes to that Dutch disease in the football context, considering what has happened tonight, you can say that probably Indonesia have this talent, and they have also tried to reinforce it by having more and more naturalized players of Indonesian heritage. Whether it's really verified or not, it's a different question. But that lack of commitment from a number of these Garudas who are not local born is staggering. Jay Isis did his part, one of the rare few. Marcelino, as the local born, did his part. Rafael Struijk was invisible, but there were days where he was not as productive up front. But those guys have once mentioned in quite a number of J episodes where I've mentioned about what it really means to play for Indonesia. Sandy Walsh, Jordi Amat, even Rafael Struijk, those guys who I've mentioned, those are among those foreign-born players who knew what it means to play for the country, having played in the Asian Cup before. But the newcomers, especially those who have had less than 5 caps, it's found one thing. Dean James was told, in a way, invisible. Mies Hilgers was supposed to be the partner for Isis, was also invisible. Dix, after he missed his penalty, went very quiet, and you can tell that everything went south from then on. And you can say that the naivety of that plan, maybe the overconfidence from Kluivert and the coaching staff, also contributed to the problem, because they thought they have now better players, they can probably finally play this Dutch system. They think that Australia will push over, which, if Kluivert and his Dutch coaching staff had exactly thought that, is a big mistake, very big mistake, because the Socceroos have shown themselves to be powerhouses. Yes, the current Socceroos may not be like the golden age of Mark Viduka, Harry Kewell, or even Brad Emerton, Mark Schreuzer and the like, but those guys who were wearing the green and gold, they totally understood what it means to wear this Socceroos jersey. A number of the foreign-born players do not. And once the chips were down, they just simply cave in. And it was very easy for Australia to score 3 goals, including 2 in the space of 3 minutes after that VAR review that led to the penalty given to the hosts. And it's like, despite having those resources, despite having those support, backing by Eric Doherty and the PSSI for this mission, and hiring Kluivert and his coaching staff for a high fee, it feels as though some Indonesian fans fears about how it's going to turn out after the abrupt sacking of Shin Tae-yong back in late December, following the rather abysmal performance in the ASEAN Championship. While understandable, but it was rash, it was poorly calculated. And as we saw later in the game, especially after Risky Riddle came on for Sandy Walsh, who only lasted 6 minutes before he had to be subbed off following a dislocation of his shoulder, it's like suddenly for that last 25 minutes of the game, Indonesia were playing the Shin Tae-yong formation, 3 centre backs, Verdong probably being pushed back as the makeshift left centre back alongside Itzis and Rizky Rido, with Dean James still overlapping alongside Kevin Dix. But by then the damage is done. The second half was somewhat better. They piled on the Garudas piled the pressure, they earned successive corner kicks, they forced Matt Ryan into a couple of big saves, and while Ramani had a more impressive outing up front in the second 45 minutes, resulting in the consolation goal for the visitors, but persistent issues that plagued the first half still remain. And one critical part is, why was it so easy for Australia to score 2 goals from corner kicks, direct headers? You can say that Miller and Jackson Irvine were very clever with their runs, evading the attention. For Miller's case, Sandy Walsh in the second half, and Irvine going in front of Jay Itzis to head home. Both of them straightforward headers. It's like, for except for the penalty, for all the other 4 goals, what were those Indonesians doing at the back? Were they just ball watching? Were they just staring at space or looking at one another? It's like, or they were hoping for Itzis to play the more heroic captain's role by doing everything. Or even in the case when after Rizky Rido came on, it's like trying to make him, Itzis and Rizky Rido do everything while the rest of the foreign born, 1 or 2 continue to be passengers, even with an improved second half. But how was that even imaginable? It's like John was also a bit anonymous, but he had a slight improvement in the second half. Verdong was more involved, so was Tom Hay, especially in the second half. But overall, it's a disastrous outing. It's quite clear that the coaching is not precise enough, it's not strong enough, it's not disciplined enough for international football. And for some reason, Kluivert and the coaching staff do not seem to grasp that. It's like, when those goals conceded were largely avoidable, and it undid. Otherwise, you can see the higher technical level of these players on display. But games in international football are not merely won because of better ability. They are not won because you make more passes, have more possession, but it's more of how you make use of the ball, the passion, the desire to fight harder for the flag that the players are representing. The Socceroos have that in abundance. The Garudas are ultimately found wanting, especially the foreign bonds. I mean, Marcelino ran himself to the ground, so did Rizky Rido, and then Ramadan did his part. Technical wise, maybe not as comparable with the foreign bond, but you can see that they are truly there to play. Then what about your Pramata Ahans who are left on the bench, or your other players? Jordi Amat also, they both were unused substitutes. They also do understand what it means to play. By all means, if Kluivert wants a higher technical standard from the Indonesian team with the players at his disposal, it's understandable, but they need to be formed into a team, and this is where Kluivert's first test has resulted in an absolute shambles failure. It's a big F for Patrick Kluivert's first game in charge, and some more in a big game where after a 0-0 draw in Jakarta last year, where Shin Tae-yong's solid defensive performance and tactical decisions, planning, eventually made Graham Arnold resign. Now it's the other way around. Tony Popovich, man, he knew what it means to be Socceroo, he knew what it means to play for country, but Kluivert, it's like he's still grasping the locals, I guess. He doesn't show as much confidence in those locals. And that's where Indonesia now will have a mountain to climb. Already after the first game, this honeymoon for Patrick Kluivert is truly well and over. From now on, it's a race of survival for Kluivert, whether to qualify for the next round of the World Cup, which looks more distant with Australia secure in the second place, even by the time the next match ends in this international window, but also for the rest of the third round qualifying campaign in June. Can Kluivert and his coaching staff do something to make the Garuda fans, the Indonesians, believe again the way they have done so impressively for the Garudas under Shin Tae-yong, win, lose or draw? So it's a big headache now. You can't just sack Kluivert and ask Shin Tae-yong to come back. It's too late. Eric Doher has to stick with his decision. And with that, I hope Kluivert knows what to do when Indonesia hosts Bahrain on Tuesday in their next World Cup qualifying match. If they fall again at home, I think it's very hard to see Kluivert lasting beyond June. Yes, it's that harsh, but that's the reality when it comes to expectancy and what the fans are looking for. It's always hard to fill in those big shoes of Shin Tae-yong, but that 1-5 performance shows that no, Kluivert still doesn't really have it yet. And welcome to that wild world of Asian football, Kluivert, Patrick Kluivert. Now you have seen it. I hope he and his Dutch coaches know what to do next. Because if they don't get at least a point against Bahrain on Tuesday, then even if Indonesia move on to the fourth round of qualifying, like a rapid charge for Indonesia, the confidence in Kluivert will be shaken so much that it will be very hard for Kluivert to get the team to play together, even with his favourite attacking football approach. But for now, when it comes to getting results, that's what the Indonesians are looking for. They want the results. They want guts. They want glory. They want passion. They want the desire. And Indonesia were found largely wanting in all these areas. This